stage the CEO of Balboa Solutions, Jay Nathan.
Let's go, Jay!
Hey, thanks, Ari. How you doing, man? Good to see you. Hi, everybody. Good to see you. This is my first time on the ClientSuccess stage as a presenter. I've been here like 5 times, maybe, and I got to lead a panel once, but my first time presenting. So super excited about this. Good to see everybody. As somebody said as I was walking in, I run a little company called Balboa Solutions. We are a solution partner in the Pendo ecosystem. So we help our customers implement, we help our customers implement Pendo, deploy and manage that platform and run their digital experience programs. But that's not what I'm here to talk to you about today. I'm here to talk to you about something that's become near and dear to my heart over the past 20 years, and that's financial literacy. Not in your own personal investments and all that kind of stuff, but in your business. And it's a really important part of what we do, and I'm excited to share some of what I've learned with you over the next 25 or so minutes. So I remember when I got my first job in a software company way back in the early 2000s, and I got this promotion into a leadership role, and I was sitting in a room full of people that were my peers, that were my bosses, my managers, their managers, and we were talking about metrics, and we were talking about financials, and we were talking about these things that I had no clue what they were actually talking about. I actually went to business school. I sat through the classes. Somehow I graduated. I wasn't great in accounting, I can tell you that. I was actually pretty bad in accounting. But I found myself in this situation where I felt like an imposter. I felt like people were talking about things that I wasn't really clued into, and I didn't really know how to understand, much less how I could help influence those things. And so what I've been doing over the past couple of years, on the side for fun, is just helping people learn about what is financial literacy, how does it help you in your career, and that kind of thing. So I'm going to figure out how to run this little guy, and then we're going to walk through some stuff here. So you guys know Dave Jackson? Anybody read his book? Good guy, friend of ClientSuccess and CS100. But Dave, in his book, Customer-Led Growth, has this great quote, and it says, the purpose of any B2B SaaS company, everybody B2B here? B2B? Raise your hand. B2C, some of that too, mostly B2B, is to deliver products that convert measurable results, customer success, right, for customers into profitable revenue for the company. That's never been more important than it is right now. As you all know, we've just come off of a 15-year champagne and cocaine run with 0 interest rates, right? And what's happened is, we'll talk more about this, but you see how the world has sort of changed very quickly over the past 24, 36 months, and things all of a sudden feel much more tight, right? All of a sudden, profits are a thing. It's not just how much we're growing on the top line. So Dave was sort of ahead of his time in saying this. Profitable revenue is the name of the game, okay? So here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about the SaaS P&L. That's fun after bingo night, right? To talk about P&Ls. We're going to do that. We're going to talk a little bit about unit economics, and then we're going to talk about how you can make an impact. And I have a special little gift for you at the end of this as well, because this is going to be sort of a quick run through. And there's a little timer here telling me exactly how much time I have left, which I really appreciate. So in the world of, let's see here. Christy, my slides messed up. Okay, so I'm just I sent my slides to Christy. She texted me on Friday afternoon and said, I don't have your slides yet. And I said, I know.
And I said, will you have them the next day? And he said, no chance. And I said, question mark, and he said, Monday.
And then I sent them to her on Sunday. You always want to exceed expectations. So anyway, so thank you. So in the world of financial accounting, okay, in the world of business, there's a group this body called the Financial Accounting Standards Board, FASB, okay? And they make all kinds of standards around what it means to report financials. You've heard of GAAP, Generally Accepted Accounting Principles, right? So you hear that a lot on earnings calls. You probably hear your board talking about GAAP revenue, GAAP net income, all that kind of stuff. But as part of GAAP, there are three core financial statements. Okay, one is the profit and loss statement, also known as the income statement. There's a balance sheet, and then there's a cash flow statement. There's a bunch of other statements too. I actually don't know a whole lot about all those other ones, right? But these I've had to spend a lot of time with. Today we're going to talk about the P&L. Now what?
This is your punishment.
This is what I get. This is what I get. There we go. All right. So let's see. Can I go back? All right. So we're going to talk about the P&L. So what the P&L does is it basically tells us how we performed, how our company performed over a specific period of time, right? So you've all heard maybe public company earnings calls. They have a requirement, if you're public, to report their financials, these three financial reports. You can go look these up online for any company that's publicly traded, okay? And so the income statement covers the period of time that they report for. So if it's Q1 earnings report, then you're going to see the income statement for that period, which basically tells us how much income we had and how much expenses we had during that period of time. Okay, now there's some complexity to it, but we'll walk through it. I know this is a little bit of an eye chart. Christy probably would have told me that had we had a call before I showed up on the stage, which was my fault, not Christy's, to be fair, okay? All right, so what is a P&L? First of all, it doesn't matter what business you're in, okay? You could be in software, you could be in manufacturing, you could be in the fast food industry. Everybody has a P&L, right? If you're in business, you generally have a P&L. You have all these statements that I just mentioned. So the income statement has a standard structure, and then there is a bunch of stuff that sits on top of that for a SaaS or recurring revenue business that we'll touch on here in a minute. But it's pretty basic, and I think I even have yeah, got that. So there are a few pieces to a P&L. First of all, of course, you have revenue, okay? That's the top line, the income that you made during a period from your customers, typically the cash that you have coming in. Not the cash, the revenue that you have coming in, okay? Then you have something called cost of goods sold. You can see it right around here, okay? That's also known as variable costs. If you went to business school or if you had a business school class or accounting, you probably heard about variable costs and fixed costs, okay? Cost of goods sold is the cost of your product, the amount of money that it takes to deliver the product that you sell, okay? We'll talk more about that in a second. Then you've got operating expenses. These are known as your fixed costs, generally speaking, okay? So in our world, we'll talk about that in just a minute, what it means in SaaS to have fixed costs. But those are the things like the leases for the offices that you sit in, the computers that we're buying for people, the sales, HR, IT, marketing teams, okay? And then you've got other expenses. We're not going to really touch on this, but interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization, all accounting stuff. We won't go too deeply into that today. Okay, so that's a P&L. Everybody has one. If you are in business, you probably have something that looks like this, okay? So how does this actually relate to our companies, right? Because y'all are probably for the most part in SaaS, right? We talked about that, B2B. So the SaaS P&L has a couple of interesting things, and it's really important to know where certain expenses from your business sit in this, okay? Because people often say, man, sales and marketing, they get all the money, right? We spend so much on acquiring customers, but why don't we spend that money over here on the team that is responsible for retaining those customers? It's a great question, but there's a really important answer to that, which is these buckets that everything sits in are really important because they have to be in proportion to the rest of the market. So it's not as easy as we think to just go take money out of the sales bucket and put it into the customer success bucket, okay? So keep that in mind, and we'll keep talking through this. So one of the things that's different about a SaaS P&L is that you might see a bookings number at the top of it. Everybody know what bookings is? It's basically sales, right? It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything to the Financial Accounting Standards Board, I can tell you that, because it's not a GAAP metric. It's a number that says, hey, we've got a contract for a future cash flow and a future amount of revenue that we expect to come into the business, okay? So first of all, bookings is not revenue, revenue is not cash, so on and so forth, okay? But usually it shows up on the SaaS P&L because the board is going to be looking at your P&L, and it's a good place for this all to sit. And there's another important reason for that, which we'll get to in a minute. Then you have your revenue. So in a SaaS P&L, we have multiple types of revenue, okay? So how many of you have subscriptions, right? Contracts, okay? That's normal in SaaS. How many of you have consumption-based revenue, right? You use more, you pay more, right? That's a different style of revenue. You can't necessarily count on it to repeat year after year. So it's recurring, maybe reoccurring, not recurring. And then there's services revenue, right? Anybody got services revenue that they bring in to their business? Exactly, right. Yet a different kind of revenue that is valued less by the business because it's not reoccurring, typically speaking. There could be some recurring revenue in some of your businesses. And maybe that's even reported as a different line item, okay? So you'll typically see revenue broken out in those buckets. Now, cost of goods sold in a SaaS P&L. This is really interesting, right? So think about your cost of goods sold as the amount that it costs to deliver an incremental copy of your product. Okay, so if I sold widgets, if I sold physical widgets and I sold this for $10 and it cost me $5 to get this, my cost of goods sold on that would probably be $5. Okay, so I'd make $5 in gross profit on that. Does that make sense, everybody? And I know I'm probably talking down to a lot of people in this room. You probably all have a lot of experience with this, but it's helpful to sort of revisit the fundamentals and the basics every once in a while. So that's the physical cost of good. But in a software company, we have a lot of people that are also responsible for helping deliver an incremental customer, right? So think about your support team, your professional services team. In most cases that I've come across, at least, customer success at least partially falls into that cost of goods sold bucket, okay? Things like your hosting costs for the software that you run, that typically sits in your cost of goods sold, okay? So cost of goods sold is how much does it take to deliver the next instance of our product to the next customer. Okay? And after you remove cost of goods sold from revenue, you have something called gross profit. Okay? Gross margin is the percentage of that you get to keep. Now, I put a couple things out here on the side just for us to think about. Gross margin in a typical company, in a typical SaaS business, at least historically, has been in the 75 to 85% range. Okay? Now, it's going to vary widely by the type of product that you deliver, the kind of customers that you serve, so on and so forth. But that's a good benchmark to look at, okay? If you're in a business that's way lower than that or way higher than that, then there's probably some nuance that you might want to understand about that business, okay? So we've talked about revenue, we've talked about cost of goods sold, we've talked about gross profit, okay? This is very important because in a minute we're going to talk about unit economics. So then we have these operating expenses. In a SaaS company, operating expenses, remember these are what I said were fixed expenses, right? You've got sales and marketing. So we sort of make a budget at the beginning of the year and say, this is how much we're going to invest in sales and marketing this year. And the reason it's important is because it impacts what we're going to bring in bookings, right? Okay, we'll talk more about it in just a minute. Sales and marketing is part of that operating expense. Product development, all of your engineers, your designers, your folks that keep the product up and running typically sit down in the product development bucket. So R&D, you may hear that called otherwise, okay? And then you've got G&A. So sometimes you'll hear this whole bucket referred to as SG&A. And if you hear that, you'll know it's sales, general, and administrative, right? HR, IT, finance, all that kind of stuff. It's all fixed cost. Once that's done, and we subtract those expenses from the revenue, we have operating profit and operating margin, okay? So just to give you a sense, if you hear these words, you won't be sitting like I was 20 years ago listening to these things and saying, I'm not quite sure what that means, right? So keep going down the list here, and we eventually get down to what we know is the bottom line, right? Net income, right? That is a GAAP metric. And by the way, there's a whole lot of accounting magic that happens in between there. What I didn't learn about accounting until I was into the real world, because I was such a poor student at accounting, is that accounting isn't math. I thought it was math, but it's really a bunch of rules for when you say an expense goes on your P&L or when you say revenue goes on your P&L, okay? So you're all shaking your heads. You knew that. It took me a long time to learn. So there's one additional metric that we talk about in SaaS a lot, which is EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. That's where all that accounting magic sits in those four little acronym letters, okay? So EBITDA is a way to think about this is it's above net income, okay? in the P&L, but really it just removes all the noise out of this thing so we can compare company against company, right? If somebody has an EBITDA margin percent of 10% over here and somebody else has an EBITDA margin percent of 20% over here, you know that there's a wildly different cost structure involved in those businesses, okay? So EBITDA, very importantly, not a GAAP metric, okay? It's not a GAAP metric. It is a sort of a made-up metric, but it's one that people have standardized on enough that we actually know what it is, okay? So it helps us compare an apple to an apple. So that's the SaaS P&L. Now, all this is really important because one of the things that you've seen happen, we'll talk a little bit about cost of sale increasing and why that makes all the other facets of what we do in customer success so important. But this little picture right here is like 20 years old, okay? It's an old picture. You've probably seen this before. But we used to sell software on a perpetual license, right? Just like a widget. We would say, hey, you give me the money and I'm gonna send you some software. In fact, the first company I worked for, we still shipped out CDs and there were CDs, luckily. I'm not that old. Some of you guys probably saw floppy disks or whatever. Not me. I'm old, but I'm not that old. Sorry, I just completely insulted Andrew. Sorry. But the problem we ran into in SaaS is that instead of getting all that revenue up front, we might get the cash for it, but we expend a lot in expenses that we have to recognize up front, and we only get these little increments of revenue back over time, right? So that flipped the whole business model. Great for the customer, a little bit tougher for us running these businesses. Now, what that looks like in the real world is it actually takes quite a while for any given customer that we obtain or acquire to become profitable to the business. And let me tell you something. This is a pipe dream. What does this say? 12 months, 13 months to get to profitability? Does anybody have any clue what the median CAC payback is right now in the public markets? Any guess? Just still in 3 years. That's a really good guess. There's some companies right now that are as high as 50, 56, 58 months, okay? You're talking 5 years before a customer becomes profitable in this industry. Now, if you're selling an HCM platform or a CRM platform, you know customers are going to stay for 7, 8, 10 years, good on you. But I've not sold a lot of those platforms in my career. I've sold a lot of other types of platforms, and these costs are a killer, right? So it's really important for us as customer success leaders to know where the challenges are in the business so that we can do our very best to support the business along the way. Okay, so there's by the way, some really good podcasts out there. CJ Gustafson has one, mostly metrics. Anybody listen to him? Ray Reich and Dave Kellogg have another podcast. Somebody can tell me the Metrics Brothers, something like that. And then there's Ben Murray, who also has some great resources, a podcast called SaaS Metrics School. If you want to, geek out to this stuff while you're falling asleep at night, those are 3 really good ones to listen to. And actually, they're pretty fun to listen to as well. So you can learn a lot from them. So why does all this matter? Basically, what we're trying to do here is we're trying to make our customer base more profitable. Okay, so that gets into something we call unit economics. Unit economics is basically taking a lot of those metrics in the P&L that we looked at and putting them together in one calculation that makes sense. Okay, LTV to CAC, anybody heard that terminology thrown around? Essentially what we want to do is make sure that our customers are generating more gross profit over time than it costs us to acquire them. Pretty simple, right? We're not just going to make it up in volume if we're not profitable. So the simple formula here is gross profit, which we talked about, revenue minus my cost of goods sold, divided by the retention rate. You starting to see where this is going here, right? That's lifetime value. Customer acquisition costs, marketing expense. Think about the events that your team throws. Think about those salespeople and their salaries and the commissions, all the things that we have to do to bring in another $1 of ARR. They all sit in that bucket. So our job as SaaS operators and customer success leaders is to make this whole thing work. Now, I think there are 4 ways to do this, all right? So here's the punchline. How do you make an impact on this? There's really 4 ways, okay? I know this is a little bit of an eye chart. Number 1, we can increase average revenue per customer, That's easy to say, right? But what does that mean? That means identifying new opportunities to get additional products into the hands of your customers. It means helping facilitate price increases when that's the right thing to do for your company or your customers, okay? It's selling your product to a new division of an existing logo, right? So it's all those things, and these are go-to-market type activities, right? And really important, I think, over the past couple of years, you've seen customer success teams get closer and closer to revenue. It's really in these ways, right, that they're either directly owning that or influencing it, okay? The second way we can do it, increase gross margin per customer. What does that mean? It means getting more efficient with how we deliver the incremental customer, okay? We can use AI. Maybe next year we only need 15 CSMs, whereas this year we had 17 CSMs, right? So it's finding ways to basically reduce the cost of goods sold relative to the revenue that we're bringing in. You could do that two ways, right? You could go back and say, and increase the average revenue per customer without increasing the spend on your cost of goods sold. Same result as reducing the cost of goods sold, and you get the revenue bump, right? So two different ways there, but increase gross margin per customer. And by the way, we have all these fantastic AI tools now. This hallway is full of them that allow us to do our jobs more efficiently. I don't know about y'all, but I'm 2 or 3 more times more effective, I feel like, and efficient in my job than I was just 3 years ago because of all these tools. The third way, increase gross retention. Like, if I didn't get up on this stage and say that, like, who am I, right? But really important. It's really critical. Everything you do every day to drive that number is very important, right? And this is where it actually fits into everything else that's going on in the business. And you all know those ways. You've heard the ways that we improve gross retention throughout this conference and probably all the other content in conferences that you'll attend over the year. And then finally, we can increase acquisition efficiency. You do see that quotas continue to go up for sales teams. Whether they're hitting those or not right now, anybody's guess, right? But making the sales team more efficient, finding those marketing channels where we can reach more prospects and customers, using community, which is something that I've tried to push for years in my roles, using customers as your flywheel. And this does get into your world, right? Because every seller needs customer references. They need case studies and examples of success with your product ready-made to go grease the skids of the sales process, okay? So you have a role to play in this. That makes the sales process more efficient, even if you're not the CRO, even if you're not leading sales, even if you don't own the upsell number directly, you still have a role to play in it, and I want you to take responsibility for it, okay? So those are the 4 ways. So we're here to make an impact, okay? And the thing that I really want you to think about is when you go back to your job Monday or whenever you're going to get back, you have a list of things that you're working on, right? You're going to tell your CEO about those things. You're going to maybe even have an opportunity to present about those things at the board level. The number one thing that your CFO, your CEO, and your board are thinking about when you talk to them are, this all sounds great, but where is it going to show up in my P&L? Okay? Does that make sense? Where is it going to show up on the P&L? And if you don't have an answer to that question, then I'd encourage you to think deeper about the initiatives that you're taking on, the initiatives that you want to push into your organization. Because unless you can tie it back to something on the P&L, you might not get it funded. You might get told no, right? If you do it for long enough, you might not have a job, right? We have to remember that these are businesses, and right now, SaaS companies are starting to function more and more like businesses than they ever have, right? We don't just rely on the money that we raised to fund the company anymore. We've really got to drive it through customers, okay? So make an impact, communicate your impact, and by the way, this is all going to grow your career, no matter what role you're in today. Knowing this stuff, having a basic grasp of it, knowing how the work that you're doing every day ties into this, it's all part of growing your career. So this QR code, so we built I thought I had 53 seconds left, but I see I'm in the negative now, so I got to get off the stage here in a minute. We built a course on financial intelligence for SaaS leaders. You'd be surprised. customer success leaders, chief marketing officers, sales leaders, everybody needs a refresher on this stuff. This QR code, many of you probably know my business partner, Jeff Brunsbach. He's actually sitting at home. He's off work today. He's waiting for you to hit that QR code and register, and he's going to send you a link to download the course that we created on this stuff for free. So if it's a 4 or 5 hour course, it's got tons of stuff in it, go into detail on the P&L, go into detail on the cash flow and the balance sheet and all that kind of stuff. And if you all paid for that before, I appreciate it. I'm sorry. But giving it to all of you all at this conference for free. So take advantage of that if you'd like it. And I guess with that, I'll wrap it up. But thank you all for your attention. I know this is it's a crazy topic, but thank you for having me. Good to see you. And I don't know that we have time for questions.